We return now to our top story. NATO Secretary-General Mark Rutte has delivered a fierce warning to Russia to stay away or risk facing the full brunt of the alliance. It comes in the same week that the United States announced a maritime security deal in the Black Sea with Russia and Ukraine. The Kremlin maintains that agreement will only come into force if sanctions on Russia's banks and exports are lifted. Joining me now in the studio to break it all down is Kerry Longhurst, Professor at Collegium Civitas. Good evening.
Hello, good evening.
Can I start with some developments from the last few hours? The EU says that, quote, unconditional withdrawal of Russia from Ukraine is a precondition to amend sanctions. What do you make of that, and will Russia ever agree to it?
Well, it's the right thing to say. It's correct for the conditions, but absolutely not. I don't think Putin has any intention of abiding by that kind of rule. It's not just about land that he wants. It's all about liquidating the sovereignty of Ukraine and vanquishing Ukrainian identity. So no, there's no indication at all that he'd abide by this kind of order or request.
And we've gone back and forth on peace negotiations. There's some talk of the US wanting a broad ceasefire by April 20. Do you believe it's possible to achieve such a quick ceasefire without giving away Ukrainian land or making concessions that ultimately fly in the face of Ukrainian sovereignty?
Yeah, I hate to be pessimistic, but I really don't see it happening. I think what we've heard coming out of Saudi Arabia this past few days or so is very little in terms of concrete detail and very little that could really kind of bridge European perspectives or American perspectives, and Russia, never mind Ukrainian perspectives as well. So I don't think we have many reasons to be optimistic about the end of April being a date for a broad ceasefire. So there's too much distance between the main stakeholders, and I think crucially the main stakeholder, i.e. Ukraine, isn't going to be served the kind of deal, the kind of settlement it absolutely deserves.
Is that a worry, that maybe there will be a ceasefire by April 20, but it won't be a just ceasefire for Ukraine?
Yeah, I think the notion of a just ceasefire is a long way off, and I don't think anyone apart from the Europeans even have the appetite or the belief in that. I mean, if you hear what's coming out of the kind of discourse from the United States, apart from there being gross incompetence all around, there doesn't seem to be a recognition that Ukraine needs to be compensated or that Russia should be punished for its aggression. So there isn't a meeting of minds or an overlap at all with regards to what a ceasefire could look like within a month or so.
Mark Rutte today, he told us, and I quote, if anyone were to make a mistake and think they could get away with an attack on Poland or any other ally, they would face the full force of this fierce alliance. Is this a threat to Moscow, or is it a message to reassure allies that NATO will keep them safe?
Yeah, I mean, there were strong words, and it's quite correct that he chose to use those words and that tenor here in Poland. I mean, Poland has been probably the best NATO citizen for a long time now, and it's no surprise that Trump is lauding praise towards Poland almost non-stop. But of course, those words were the kind of repetition of Article 5, and of course primarily they were against Putin and his acolytes around the world, but they were indeed about reassuring and kind of showing solidarity in amongst NATO allies and citizens as well, and populations. But I think as well his words were also intended for American ears and the White House in particular to say, look, don't forget, NATO is about all of us, and that we shouldn't race towards, dividing NATO between a European voice and an American voice. So I think they were words for all of those stakeholders and all of those actors involved.
And for Mark Rutte, I mean, as the head of NATO, it will be crucial to keep the US on side, right?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it seems like his relationship, let's say, with Donald Trump is better than it could be, but it's worse than it should be, I would say. So, of course, he's pivotal in this. But I think what is worrying, or what has kind of emerged really, are these two different voices and pillars of NATO, which, as the head of NATO, he has to try to overcome and strive and sandwich back together.
You mentioned the significance of Mr. Rutte making these comments here in Poland. What does it say about NATO's relationship with Poland and Poland's role in NATO?
Well, I think it shows that the alliance realises as a whole, and bear in mind that NATO is a huge organisation, that this Eastern Front, this frontier of NATO, really is the most important to protect and defend. So I think it says that. But it is, as I mentioned before, in recognition that Poland has emerged as perhaps the best or one of the best NATO citizens since it joined NATO all those years ago. And this is why it's happened here in Warsaw, and Warsaw is the focal point for the alliance's position towards NATO and this whole eastern frontier as a whole, from the very north to the very south.
Black Sea, when it comes to security in the region, we look at the Black Sea, and this ceasefire deal is shaping up, but it's only if the Kremlin gets what it wants. Is this a step in the right or the wrong direction for Ukraine?
Definitely in the wrong direction, not just for Ukraine, but I think for the Western world and democracy in general. From what I understand, the terms of that, they're calling it a partial ceasefire, isn't really worth a great deal to us and to Ukraine and the West, but it is worth a great deal to Russia. It would mean rehabilitating Russia into the global trading world order, which is not surely in our interests or in the interest of Ukraine. So we shouldn't really call it a positive deal for our side at all, I would say.
Is there an argument to be made that there has to be some sort of outreach to Vladimir Putin? You have to give him something for him to even come to the table?
Well, I suppose I'm sitting here in Warsaw and I'm quite comfortable, and I'd like to say no, we shouldn't give any concessions at all. I mean, it's a terrorist state. It was unprovoked aggression into a sovereign country. So, you know, why should we entertain this idea of a concession? And that's a pretty big concession, allowing this trade route to continue. I think Putin is also talking about reducing sanctions and allowing banking to return. So that would be a huge range of sanctions for a country which carried out punitive measures towards a sovereign country.
When we talk about concessions, a really interesting dynamic going on between obviously Vladimir Putin, Russia, and the Donald Trump administration. Is there a point where Vladimir Putin does wave the white flag, or will he just drag his heels more and more to get as much as he can out of Donald Trump?
Yeah, I really don't like agreeing on any kind of front with Donald Trump, but I think on this idea he's completely correct. And I think it shows either that Trump isn't a very good, calculator or business person, because he didn't read this deal very well at all. And it seems like only now he's realising perhaps that Putin does not want peace, does not want a full cessation of hostilities. But I think more fundamentally, Putin does not have the vocabulary of peace. It's not what he wants. He isn't just interested in a land grab into Ukraine. Like I said before, he wants to diminish or liquidate Ukraine's sovereignty.
Volodymyr Zelensky and French President Emmanuel Macron in Paris tonight. President Macron will host another leaders' summit tomorrow. We've seen these Paris summits before. I was there a couple of weeks ago. Will this be hot air, or do you expect some sort of progress?
I think there'll always be a fair amount of hot air when it comes to Europeans meeting together. It's bringing together a very, very large number of countries. I expect as well there's a bit of competition for leading that group between Britain and France and maybe others as well. So the hot air is inevitable. But things have moved on so quickly. This terrible partial ceasefire is on the brink. Incompetence from the United States. So I think hopefully this is a chance where the Europeans really will commit to something tangible. They'll back this idea with concrete measures to bring boots onto the ground. They'll talk in detailed form about security guarantees. I'm optimistic, but I've been optimistic or overly optimistic before. But I'm still hopeful that it'll be more than hot air tomorrow.
Fingers crossed.
Yeah, I hope so.
Kerry Longhurst, Professor at Collegium Civitas, thank you again for your time.
Yeah, you're welcome.
And that's all for World News tonight here on TVP World. Do stay with us. I'm Aaron Darman. Good night.